counts for our organizations and as a nonprofit. So if you haven't already, please feel free to type into the chat. That way we can see where you're tuning in from, as well as what your favorite bird is. So I'm going to share my screen, which is the term of 2020 and will be for probably 2021 as well. And I am presenting today on birding for yourself and science. So let me just cue this up. Awesome. So thank you so much, Susie and Denver Audubon, for having me. I'm really excited to share some of my knowledge, but also hopefully to learn from a lot of you as well, because I believe that I definitely do not have all the answers, and that we can learn a lot from each other. So like Susie said, my name is Tyler Cash, and I'm the Camp and Community Coordinator over at the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, and I'll be your presenter today for birding for yourself and for science, something that I hold near and dear to my heart and something that I just have a lot of fun doing as well. So we'll be focusing on how we as bird enthusiasts, or as a bird nerd, as I call myself, and many of you probably call yourself that as well, how we can contribute our sightings to science while also satisfying our own desire of birds and birding in general. I also like to do a bit of virtual birding during my webinars. So at the end of this presentation, we will be working to identify some tricky species. So either you might have a field guide in your head, or if you have one nearby, feel free to grab that, because I like to have a little fun in these virtual programs, and why not nerd out on identifying some birds together. So we'll be doing that a little bit later. But since we're still very much in the depths of winter, I have chosen a good amount of migratory birds for us to get excited about for spring. I feel like when winter, even though it just started, I'm already excited for spring to come. So if you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please use that chat window, and we'll get to your questions either as they come up or definitely at the end. We have some time at the end to have a little discussion and to hear from each other. We're also recording this webinar, so don't worry about scrambling to take any notes. Susie will send that recording out to any registered participants. So quickly, when Susie, when she came to the Bird Conservancy team and asked what we can present on for this conservation series, that was based on the 7 simple actions to save birds. I personally really wanted to present on watching birds and sharing what you see, because at the core of conservation of any species, we have to foster a love for it before we can actually conserve it. If we don't have that love or that passion for it, we as humans just won't be that interested in it. So getting out and watching birds and saving them and sharing what we know will definitely help us conserve species. And we fall in love with birds once we start noticing them. And then once we start identifying them and learning about them, I feel like we learn even more. So luckily for all of us as human beings, birds can be found everywhere. So this can even be done from the comforts of our own home. So just a little bit about myself. Again, I'm the Camp and Community Coordinator for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. I've been with the Bird Conservancy for about 2.5 years now. It's definitely one of my dream jobs. It's such a great organization to work for, and I hope you've either know of us or have been to a program before, but I'll tell you a little bit more about our organization in a little bit. But like Susie said, I love hiking and climbing and being out in nature with my 2 crazy dogs, and being outside as much as possible. So just quickly, I know a lot of us have used Zoom before. Zoom is a platform that a lot of us are used to when it comes to webinars. But if you've never used Zoom before, lucky you. But also that takes a little bit of playing with to get used to it. So I just want to point out that your video and your microphone should be off and muted. It helps our technology run a little bit smoother, and keeps me from being distracted from looking at everyone. So to turn these off, all you need to do is scroll down to the bottom of your screen and make sure you have a red line through that microphone and through that camera icon as well. And then at the end of our presentation here, we'll have a little bit of time for a discussion and to answer questions. And if you feel comfortable, you can totally turn your video on then. And to turn them on, you'll just re-click them so you don't have those red lines through them. When I went into full screen, your screen probably went full as well. If you need to escape the full screen, you can either push escape on your keypad or push exit full screen at the top. And then at the very bottom of your window, you'll see the chat button, which I've circled here in green. If you click that chat box, it will dock your box off to the right. That way we can all have a conversation and y'all can chat to everyone. So make sure you are sending that message to everyone. I love interacting, even virtually, it's still possible. So feel free to use that chat box to ask questions or to talk to each other. All right, so I know Susie asked a question earlier for attendance, but this is just for me to get to know you all a little bit better. It's the way I start all of my programs and the way that I get to know everyone a little bit better. So in the chat box, type where you're from, because I saw that some of us are outside of Colorado, so you can do your state or your city. And then what was the last really cool bird that you saw? It might be some of our favorites that we mentioned earlier. Or maybe you've seen a really cool bird that you would love to share about. I'm currently in Westminster at my house. And the last really cool bird that I saw was during our Christmas bird count. A couple weeks ago, we got a short-eared owl that was pretty awesome to see fly overhead. I love the golden eyes. A long-tailed duck. Yes, bald eagles. They're always the best, especially in the city. Ooh, acorn woodpeckers. I miss those so much. I'm from San Diego, and we used to have those everywhere. A wood stork. Awesome. I love that there's so many birds to think of. Whenever I ask this question, my brain just goes through a field guide to have me try to pick one. So thank you all for using that chat function. Keep using it. I love to keep this interactive. I'll be checking it every now and again. And if anything pertinent comes up, I'm sure Susie can let me know. But we're going to dive right into our presentation. All right, so a little bit about Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. If this is your first time tuning into a program with us, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you've seen us in person before in the past or attended one of our webinars that we've been having the past year, basically now. So a little bit about our organization. Our mission at the Bird Conservancy is to conserve birds and their habitats. We do this through an integrated approach of science, education, and land stewardship. So we use this three-pronged approach to accomplish our mission. So our science team, they're out in the field, they're collecting data and just advancing the knowledge of birds. They're trying to learn new things about birds to help us conserve them. And they do that through bird banding, through telemetry, so many cool things. They do a lot of really cool stuff. And we'll be talking a little bit about that today in our webinar as well. Our stewardship team, we like to say they're the boots on the ground. They're working with private landowners and ranchers to make sure that land that they own is as environmentally friendly for birds, but also for other animals as possible, but also while making sure the rancher is making a profit because we know that livelihood is really important. Then the education team, that is the team I'm a part of. Our goal is just to not so much inspire the next generation, but to inspire everyone. We want to get people out there in nature, looking at birds and developing that connection with the natural world. Because the more that we can do that, the more inspiration we can have to keep fighting the good fight and conserving species. Something really cool about the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies is our work radiates really, really vast. We work across the breeding, the wintering, and the migratory ranges of birds. And we also recognize that birds don't know about borders. So we extend our work up into Canada, all through the Rockies, and even down into Mexico. And even virtually, now we are everywhere. It's so great to see people tuning in from different states and even different countries. All right, in this webinar, we'll be covering a couple different things. We're going to be learning about the diversity of songbirds. We're going to learn a little bit about how to find tricky birds. Most of it is going to be about how to become a community scientist and how your birding can contribute to something bigger than just our life lists. We'll also have some fun at the end, going and doing some digital birding on my PowerPoint. We'll all basically be birding together virtually from our homes. And that'll be a lot of fun. But this is just a quick fun picture I wanted to add into my PowerPoint. This is me and one of our scientists, Arvind Punjabi. He was with us on our summer camp 2 years ago in pre-COVID times. we were birding on Trail Ridge Road, and Arvind was kind enough to come along. And if any of you know Arvind or have birded with him, you learn so much from him. He's a wealth of knowledge. Our campers had so much fun. He was teaching us about rosy finches, peregrine falcon nests, how to spot white-tailed ptarmigan. It was definitely a time that I can't wait to do again, to be out birding with each other again, because we can still learn a lot virtually, but that human connection is nice as well. So that's a little bit about what we'll learn. So we'll dive in. So in the very first webinar, if you were able to attend, Susie introduced us to the 7 simple actions to help birds. And we'll be covering all these throughout this conservation series. If you're unfamiliar with them, these are the actions that came out of the 3 Billion Birds Lost study that Bird Conservancy, and more specifically Arvind actually, was a part of. And it was published back in October 2019. I'm sure most of us have heard about it. And we will continue to hear about it into the future, because it was a very precedented study that came out. So today I get the luxury of talking about watching birds, but also sharing what you see, and how this can actually help us save birds in the long run. All right, I always add this slide. If you've ever done a presentation with me, I will always have this in my slide deck. But why birds? Why is Bird Conservancy of the Rockies an organization that saves birds? Why do we have Denver Audubon and the Audubon Society and all these organizations? Well, to break it down just in simple matters, birds are environmental indicators. They're one of the first groups of animals that are going to be affected by environmental change. So that canary in a coal mine, or those wildfires that we had earlier last year, with all the birds maybe dying from that, or that early snowstorm. They tell us a lot about our environment. They're also extremely inspirational. They inspire us to do artwork, engineering. I know I like to make little bird cards to send to my family. They're super inspirational just to watch. They're also a great ecosystem service. So they provide us services such as pest control and seed dispersal. They do their best to eat all those mosquitoes so we don't get eaten. So they're doing us a favor there. But most importantly, birds are extremely accessible. No matter where you live in the world, whether you're deep in Denver in the city, or you're out next to a national forest, you can find birds no matter where you live. And I think that's really important to share, because you just have to look outside your window for long enough and you'll probably see one fly by. There are so many birds to learn about and to identify. That's why I will educate about birds probably the rest of my life. But how many birds actually are there? There's around 10,000 in the world. In North America alone, we have around 1,000. In the lovely state of Colorado, we have around 507 different species which can be seen. Then at Bar Lake, which is where the Bird Conservancy headquarters is located at, there's been around 350 species spotted just there. If you've ever gone birding in Bar Lake, it's wonderful. If you have not and you live in Colorado, I highly suggest getting out to Bar Lake for a little birding adventure, especially after this, because I will be leaving you all with a little challenge. But the main thing I like about this is birding really is a lifelong hobby. On this webinar, we probably have beginners, intermediates, experts. There's such a wide range, and there's so much to learn about birds. All you really need to do if you ever feel like you're bored with birding is just go to another state or go to another side of the country, and you'll respark that, let alone go somewhere else in the world. And you'll have to start all over in identifying birds, which I think it's just a lifelong hobby to love. So I'm going to be focusing more on the passerine group of birds in this presentation, mostly because they make up a majority of our birding checklists, especially at different times of the year. So what we generally refer to as songbirds, that's what compose most of the order of the passerine. So this huge order includes more than half of all the bird species in the world, which is around 6,000 different species. In Colorado specifically, there are approximately 175 birds that we classify as passerines that can be seen anytime during the year. And if we add in some of those rarities that we get, we're talking about a lot of birds to sort out. Passerines, a lot of us consider them to be songbirds. They have that distinctive vocal organ that allows the birds to have a wide range of songs and calls. But I think the most interesting part is their appearance varies so greatly, from our smallest passerine, the little ruby-crowned kinglet that weighs approximately 5 grams, all the way up to our raven, which weighs about 3 pounds. So within that, there are so many families to learn about. So all these members of a species, they nearly always share some similar plumage, similar color details. The male and the female, the adult and the young, of nearly all the species, they share a characteristic size, structure, as well as habits that contribute to the look of the species. So if you're just beginning birding, or you've just started not too long ago, I always like to say, at least try to get down to family. If you can get to the family, because they have that specific look of a species, it'll definitely get you a lot closer to identifying exactly what you're looking at. So these species, the passerines, since they make up such a large variety of the birds that we see, they're what I consider the most challenging here in North America, but also the most exciting to see, because I know whenever an uncommon warbler pops up in my field of view, I get super excited. Or if I figure out a flycatcher, a dusky from a willow, or the Epidemax family, this family, just passerines in general, just get me really excited. And I feel like it takes your birding level to the next level when you start identifying some of these. So how do we take that next step of identifying common birds that we see in our backyard to uncommon birds in new and unfamiliar areas? The main thing is you have to explore different habitats. If you stay in your backyard, eventually your yard list will come to a screeching halt, and it takes a while to add a new one. But it's really exciting when you get to add a new one. But eventually you're going to need to explore different habitats to learn a little bit more about the birds that you can see. You'll see a larger variety of birds. So in the chat, I want to hear from you all. What is your favorite habitat to explore or to go birding in? So type into the chat. You can just rapid fire what it is. What's your favorite habitat to go birding or to explore in? The woods. Thank you, Hunter. Mountains. Ginger says watery areas. The South Platte Park. Wetlands. Nice. Yeah, the foothills. Yeah, we do have some good green belts here in Colorado. The plains. Nice. Can't forget about the plains. Thank you all so much for using that chat function. I love to learn a little bit more about the participants, especially since I can't see anyone. But my favorite place to go birding, my favorite habitat, I really love those wetland riparian zones where we have water and a little bit of forest and woods and deciduous trees. Mostly because I love water. I grew up next to the ocean, so whenever I'm near water, I'm usually a happy person. But also the diversity of species around riparian zones. Usually you can find a higher diversity there as well. But uncommon, let me go back. Uncommon or migratory birds that come through only certain times of the year, they can definitely be a lot harder to spot versus our robins in our backyard or our blue jays that love to say, hey, I'm here. Migratory birds can be a little bit harder to spot. So I always like to say most of the rare birds that I've actually found are usually in a parking lot or a park near a house. But for the most part, migratory birds can be pretty hard to spot. But it is important to take the time to wait. And this is a skill that I always teach our summer campers and anybody that's new to birding. Whenever I'm birding, I have to tell myself to slow down. I'm a really fast hiker. I like to move fast. But I also love birding. And so whenever I tell myself just to stop and wait and just sit there, that's usually when I start ticking up my species count for the day. So especially when I stop in an area that I think will be birdie, like a riparian zone or next to a river, I like to sit and wait for 15 minutes and let the birds come to me. If you're moving around, you'll miss a lot of birds if you're just walking by. in college, we always called it the naturalist pace, where it takes us 8 hours to go 1 mile because there's so many cool things to stop and look at. So I always just like to remind people that if you feel like you're not really seeing a lot of birds when you're going out birding, if you just sit and wait, I'm sure you'll tick up your species list. And this reminds me, just 2 summers ago, at one of our bird camps with our older kids, me and 5 other campers were walking around going birding, and a thunderstorm just came in, but it died down quickly. So we're walking around, everything's a little wet, and we hear some chatter in this really thick willow thicket. And I just told everyone, let's just stop and stay here. Even though mountain bikers were coming flying by and people were looking at us like we were all weird, but we stopped and it got still and quiet. And we had the opportunity to identify like 10 different species. And most of these birds were life birds for the campers. They're birds they'd never seen before. And then we walked away and we're high-fiving each other and we're just so excited because we just stopped and we waited for the birds to come to us. And that's definitely a thing I'll definitely remember. So this brings up a really good question. How exactly do we find good birding spots? So I hope you're ready, because now we are going to dive really deep into the world of eBird. eBird is such a wonderful technology that we have and that we are able to use. So if you're not familiar with eBird, eBird is managed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And eBird as a whole allows you to do so many different things. It allows you to find more birds. A lot of us probably know eBird for keeping a track of our bird lists and maybe our photos and sounds as well. But also you can explore the latest sightings from around the world. It's one of the largest, or it is the largest birding community because it's so widespread throughout the world. And it also allows you to help contribute to science and conservation. So the goal for eBird is to gather all of this information in the form of checklists of birds that we send. They archive it, and then they freely share it to power new data-driven approaches to science, conservation, as well as education, which kind of sounds like Bird Conservancy's mission as well. eBird is the largest biodiversity-related science project in the world. There are more than 100 million bird observations submitted to eBird every single year, and that number is like growing exponentially. Now that we have smartphones and technology's gotten a lot better, more people are starting to use eBird and clock their observations. So they strive to provide the birding community with the most current and useful information that's related specifically to birds. eBird has really changed the way we bird, honestly. While eBird was around when I first started birding, I definitely did not have a smartphone. The app wasn't even created yet. And I would just keep my list on my piece of paper, and I'd go home and enter it into the eBird database on my computer. And just like with technology, things just keep improving and improving. But any source of technology, a lot of us might like frown at it a little bit, especially since we do spend a lot of time on a screen, especially now more than ever. I always like to think of technology as more of a tool. It's a tool that we can use to further our knowledge, as long as we don't abuse that tool and we still get out and enjoy nature without having our phones out all the time. So we're going to dive into this tool to help us become better birders. And I'm going to go through not the whole of eBird, because you could be an eBird forever and just like spend your life in eBird. But I'm going to give you all some tips and tricks to go from just submitting checklists to actually expanding your knowledge about birds, just using one website. So our first tool is the eBird hotspots. If you've ever used the eBird hotspot, feel free to enter that into the chat, because I think these are the most exciting things. I love these hotspots, and they do have them on an app now. But on the eBird website, which we are going to explore after this slide, we're going to dive in, but this is on their website and it's now an app if you've downloaded it before. But a hotspot is just an area where there have been eBird checklists submitted. So we see a bunch of different colors on this map. The colors are based on the number of species observed in those areas. So if you see those gray and light blue, those are lower numbers of species. And then the dark red can get all the way up into 500 species and above. So just looking at this map of the Front Range, if you look at the red spots, and if you're a birder, you probably know where those are, because those are really great places to look. So this is an amazing database to have as a birder or someone that's interested in birds. You can look at hotspots around the world. You can use it in your backyard, or you can even use it to plan your yearly trips abroad. Whenever I go on a vacation somewhere, the first thing I do before I get there is I look on eBird and I look at hotspots to try to get a new lifer, or just to bird a new area. So that brings us to our hotspot. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go through just a couple things on the eBird website that we can explore a little bit more. Just because I feel like instead of adding screen clips, let's just dive into we can share screens now, which is really cool. So this is the wonderful world of eBird. This is just their home screen. You have to create a login, just like with everything we have in the world nowadays. But if you have that login, that's the way that you can submit checklists. So I'm going to go quickly. So if you want to do hotspots, if we're really interested in birding a certain area, that's what this explore function is right here. So we're going to explore an area. So you click explore, and again, there's so much you can explore, just like with the internet. But I'm going to focus on exploring hotspots. So you can explore based on species. Let's say you really want to see a flammulated owl, or you really want to see a sandhill crane. You can explore where those species are being seen, which I think is really cool. Or if you're just interested in going to a new area because it's migration, or you heard about a cool spot that you want to check out, explore hotspots, which is that little button right there. And you get this really cool looking map of all of the hotspots that eBird has in the world, which can be a little overwhelming. And that's why I like to go off location. So for the location, I'm just going to type in, I believe Denver Audubon. Let's see, at the Nature Center. We'll go off that one. So the Denver Audubon Nature Center. Let's say we're going to go birding there. I have led bird walks here, and so I definitely use this tool because I don't get down there all the time. So you click on the little dot, and then you can click on View Details, and just this general information shows you how many species have been observed there, how many checklists have been submitted. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, you click View Details, and that's going to take you to a page where it has the most recent checklists. And you can see what people are seeing and when they're seeing it, if it wants to load. But this is just, I love exploring this, and especially if you're going into a new area. So if you are an eBirder, as they like to call themselves, and your account is public, what you're entering into those hotspots are your checklists, so that other people can actually see what you're seeing. So we can see Chris, who looked like he went birding today, lucky guy. This is what he saw today and how many of them that we saw. So if you are a new birder in the Denver area and you want to get out this weekend and go birding, because it's such a great social distancing activity, and you want to see a hooded merganser because you've never seen one, and you go on this explore tool, you can see that Chris, our friend here, he saw 8 of them at the Denver Audubon Nature Center. I'm guessing in one of the ponds that they have near there. So this is just a great tool if you're looking to explore an area that you've never been to, or if you're just curious about what people have been seeing. It'll rate people too. So it'll rate the people that enter the most checklists, which a lot of you probably recognize a lot of these names if you're in the birding community. So the Explore tool is really fun. I've spent a lot of time exploring just for fun. But that's just one tool that we can use, that eBird provides us with, and the checklist that we submit provides us with. Another tool is the science. So the eBird science, some of us might be into birding just to bird because it's such a great leisurely activity, and others of us might be really interested in the data that eBird can provide or that we can enter. And I'm not going to go too much into this science part because you could be on this forever, but I do want to mention and show you, I love playing around with the eBird status and trends. So this is all based off of checklists that either you've entered or we've entered, what the community is entered. And they gather all this, and it helps us learn a lot more about the abundance of species and where they're moving to. So I'm gonna enter a species name. Let's see if I can remember someone's favorite bird. Let's go with the red-breasted nuthatch. So we wanna learn a little bit more about the red-breasted nuthatch. So we can click that, and then we can explore it a little bit. So these are, again, I'm gonna just kind of go over this pretty quickly. But this gives us a lot of the behind the scenes science about what we've learned about red-breasted nuthatches so far. And one of my favorite little animations is the abundance animation. So we can play this. And this is based off of their checklists. So the relative abundance is how frequently they've been seen in an area. So you can see the purple areas, there's a lot of red-breasted nuthatches there. That's where they're thriving and doing really well during a certain time of year. So that one's really fun. And I'm gonna enter a little more, I'm gonna go back and just do more of a migratory species. Let's see, let's just go with again, the field guide just flies through my head. Let's just go with a barn swallow. And their abundance animation is gonna look a lot different than that red-breasted nuthatch because barn swallows are migratory. They're moving from one area to another. And so we can watch their abundance, and we can actually see where people are submitting checklists and seeing them throughout the year. So we can see they come up into North America in the spring and summer, and then they make their amazing migratory journey down into South America and Central America. And I could just watch these forever. I think it's just a very visually pleasing data set. But there's a lot more that you can do on this as well. So if you want to learn more about a species, you can explore it in the science feature. And I'm not gonna dive too much deeper into that. I just wanted to let you all know it's there if you haven't used it. You can go to all species. They don't have them for every single species. This is a growing and living database. But they do have a lot of species throughout the world that you can look at. One last thing I want to mention, let's see here, if you are an eBirder, they do give you a little profile, which is pretty cool. And your eBird, I feel like whenever I look at this, I just want to like keep adding to it. I haven't done many checklists recently, but this just shows you where you've been birding over your time, when you started, how many species you've seen, your latest checklists, the states or countries you've been in. So it takes all of the data that you've entered and actually quantifies it a little bit for you as well. And one last thing is, if you are really into birding and looking for rare birds, you can sign up for a rare bird alert through eBird, and you'll get wonderful emails every morning about rare birds that have been seen and locations, and you can go out and use the Explore tool and find some more birds. So that's a little bit just about exploring the eBird database. Again, there's so many more things you can do with it, but I just wanted to let you all know that the eBird website is something really fun to play with and can be used as a great technological tool to help you learn a lot more about birds that you may be interested in. So I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. All right. All right, so that brings me to checklists. So a checklist, a lot of us have probably submitted an eBird checklist before. And actually, let me stop sharing for a second. I shared the wrong one. All right, let's go back to here. A lot of us have probably shared checklists before, and when we think about eBird, we probably think just about submitting checklists. So that's why I'm not going to go over too much about it, but feel free to type in the chat if you've ever submitted an eBird checklist before, or if you don't know anything about it, that's okay too, because I'm going to give you a little general overview about eBird checklists. Because at the core of eBird, we would not have eBird if we didn't submit checklists. So it's a great way to find good birding spots, and there's so many functions you can use. But now I just really wanted to focus on what a community scientist is, and how we can become a community scientist and remain a community scientist. So the definition of a community scientist, which maybe you're more aware of the citizen scientist. Citizen scientists and community scientists, they're the same thing. They're just worded differently. So the definition, it's a member of the general public, so like a lot of us, who collects and analyzes data relating to the natural world, typically as part of a collaborative project like eBird, with professional scientists. So as birders, as people who are interested in birding, our observations are greatly appreciated by the scientific community. There's not a whole bunch of funding for scientists to be out collecting data 24/7. It's not realistic. But there's a lot of people like us in the community that can help. And I think that's why community science is so cool, is because we can all really be scientists, as long as we know about it and submit some checklists. So by submitting checklists into eBird, we help scientists answer questions mostly about bird abundance. So I showed you that bird abundance map earlier. That shows us how many birds are in a certain area during a certain amount of time. So I'm just gonna go quickly over how we can submit checklists, because there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. A lot of us have smartphones nowadays, which is great. It's such a great tool to use. And the eBird app is free, which is awesome. So all you really have to do to submit a checklist is enter when you're going birding, where you are, which the GPS function on your phone will help you with that, and then how you went birding, so your effort. It'll ask you how far you traveled, how many number of observers, how long you were birding for. And one thing I really want to mention with this is it's really important to enter numbers into our species. It's really important to count how many birds you see. I know I used to do this, and it can be really overwhelming when you see just a huge pack of Canada geese or a lot of swallows. Some of us might have entered an X before, just because it was too overwhelming to count. But if you enter an X into this database, it doesn't tell the scientist anything, because an X could literally mean 1, it could mean 1.5, or it could mean like 1,000 to a scientist. So estimating and learning how to count birds can be really important, because if you're estimating, it's a better figure than just an X, because that doesn't help the database at all. So I just wanted to mention that, because I used to enter X into my checklist a whole bunch, and now I don't. I go to the extra effort of counting. So with your checklist, a great thing about this app is it actually will it'll tell you the birds that are most likely in the area during that period of time, based on observations as well. So it helps you narrow it down a little more. So that's just quickly. I'm sure a lot of us have used this app before, and if you haven't, there's some great little tutorials on eBird as well. And just play around with it. It's really user friendly, and it goes through how to do it pretty simply, I think. And I'm not a great technological person, so don't think I'm really techie, because I'm not. But it is really user friendly, and these checklists are at the core of eBird. So I'll make sure we have enough time to get through everything, because I can talk about eBird forever. But this whole Colorado conservation series is based on this 3 billion birds lost study. This study came out at the end of 2019 in the journal Science. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about it, but we've lost 2.9 billion birds since the 1970s. So I don't know about you, but I wondered, how did they get this data? How were scientists able to know this? Because it's such a large number. And the data that they took included 48 years of different data from multiple independent sources of mostly community science databases. So those databases included the North American Breeding Bird Survey, the Audubon's Christmas Bird Count, eBird data, and other bird monitoring initiatives. So the more eBird checklists and Christmas bird counts you attend, the better understanding scientists will have about bird conservation. So this whole paper was used mostly from community science data, which I just find fascinating. And so how does Bird Conservancy use community science, and how do we use that data? So the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, we use it, community scientists, in a couple of different ways, mostly to gather data on bald eagles, as well as eastern screech owls. So the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, our Bald Eagle Watch program, was started when we started as an organization back in 1988. We started that eagle program to monitor and help protect the bald eagle nest, which is at the Bar Lake State Park, which is just northeast of Denver. And now we have community scientists that monitor eagle nests across the Front Range to provide information to biologists on the nesting success of the Colorado population of bald eagles. So community scientists, so like any of us, they help us monitor and collect data on bald eagle nesting behavior, as well as productivity. So they go out and they report on any disturbances that may impact nesting eagles. And this data really helps wildlife managers and conservation groups ensure continued healthy populations of those bald eagles. So our Bald Eagle Watch is conducted from February to July and is all along Colorado's Front Range, so from Brighton to Fort Collins. And anyone who can monitor designated nests or one nest weekly for a minimum of 1 hour, if you can fill out a data sheet and enter into an online reporting database, if you can drive to a nest site, if you enjoy monitoring, either alone or with another person, and you have binoculars or maybe a spotting scope, can help in this project. And I'll let you all know where to go for more information about this as well if you're interested in signing up, because that will be coming up pretty soon, that we'll be doing training for that. Another way that we use community science data is with our Eastern Screech Owl project, and that monitors and collects data on Eastern Screech Owls and other owl species that live along the Cache La Poudre River in Fort Collins. Data help guide, so this data that we collect, it helps guide restoration efforts along the river. So these surveys happen from March to mid-May at different survey sites along the Poudre River in Fort Collins. So anyone with an interest in owls can participate. It does require the ability to conduct surveys at night, follow a standardized protocol, and also drive to monitoring sites or walk along the river. So if you are somebody that's tuning in from Fort Collins, this is a project that you can help out with for more community science. Then our science team is constantly coming out with publications about the species they're studying. You can find these on our website. We have most of our publications on our website if you want to read them. I will provide the information if you are interested in helping out with our Bald Eagle Watch or Eastern Screech Owl project. So there are, of course, other community science projects, which I kind of just briefly mentioned. But before I even get into these, community science is so important to our organization and to science in general, because the more information that we can help provide, the more that we can help conserve birds as well as their habitats. So the Christmas bird count, it's been running for 121 years. I'm sure some of us attending this call have been on one before. If you haven't, they are really fun. We just wrapped up the season. It was a really interesting year with COVID, and there weren't as many Christmas bird counts happening. But it all happens on one day throughout that time period of December 14th through January 5th. And all of that data gets compiled into this Audubon database that can be compared to years past. All of that information is also free to the public. If you go on the Christmas bird count website, you can really dig into that data. It's pretty fun. We held ours at Bar Lake, which I'm a compiler for this year. Of course, it was really small with COVID restrictions, but it was really nice to get out and count. And we had some interesting finds this year, which was pretty cool as well. So the Christmas bird count is always a great way to add to the community science database. And then the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is coming up in February, from February 12th through the 15th. I know Denver Audubon is doing a program about it. We at Bird Conservancy are going to do a webinar on it as well, just to get people prepared, go through the eBird how to submit checklist a little bit more. But basically the Great Backyard Bird Count is just a weekend in February and they take the data from eBird and they compare it to years past as well. So you can literally do this in your backyard for 10 minutes. or you can go birding all day in multiple locations. You just have to use our wonderful eBird that we just learned about in order to contribute to that. There's also a lot of local bio blitzes that happen throughout the year. And a bio blitz is basically just a nature nerding event. You learn from so many great experts that come out, and you actually enter your observations into an iNaturalist app. iNaturalist is an app that focuses mostly on just the natural world. It's not just focused on birds or anything. You can submit pictures of plants that you don't know, or bugs or insects, as well as birds. But all of that information gets contributed to iNaturalist, and then observers and scientists help confirm what you've seen. And we'll actually be doing a BioBlitz, hopefully, at the beginning of June out at Bar Lake. So those are just some other community science projects. There are so many that you can participate in that focus on different species. So if you ever want to participate in something, all you have to do is Google community science or citizen science projects, and it'll give you something really fun to do. All right, that was so much talking. That's the one thing with these virtual programs, it's so much talking. But that's okay, we're gonna get to a little fun part of our virtual webinar before we open it up for discussion. So hopefully their brains are moving. I know happy hour is starting, so maybe your brain's slowing down, but we're gonna do a little bit of a bird ID quiz with just some migratory birds that we can get excited about. So if you are like ready to go, you can enter what you think it might be into the chat. If you're just learning and you're a beginning birder, that's totally okay. Like we said earlier, try to narrow it down to a family. That's a great place to start. If you know right away, maybe don't type it in too fast. Take a breath and then enter it. I know we get really excited as birders. And if you don't know, that's totally okay. We're here to learn from each other. So I'm gonna just get this going. I'll pull up the chat so I can see if people are getting the birds. And there's multiples per slide. So feel free to get your typing fingers ready and your brains on, or maybe get your field guide cracked open. Here is our first couple of bird species. So again, these pictures aren't to scale. I don't have videos of them. They're just pictures that I got off All About Birds, but it is a great way because these birds aren't gonna fly away right away. So feel free to type into the chat. If you wanna identify, you can say the top or you can say the bottom, and we'll see if anyone can do these. All right, some questions or answers are coming in. We have narrowed it down to a swallow. Maybe a barn swallow. When I was making this presentation, I'm just so excited for swallows to come back and migrate back because they're really cool. I can feel everyone thinking or going through their field guide. I'm going to be doing some migratory species, so we've probably been in our winter brain. But it looks like Julia has got it. So our top bird, this is a tree swallow, and then the bottom is the violet green swallow. So some differences about these that's good to notice is the tree swallow, the white extends underneath the eye, where the violet green, the white will extend above the eye. So it's a great field mark to look at if they're not in flight. When they're in flight, if you actually look back towards the rump, the violet green swallows will have the white extending a little bit more up on the rump, and the tree swallow doesn't have as much white. So that's just a couple quick ways to identify tree swallows versus violet green swallows. But if you've ever tried to identify these in flight with binoculars, it can be a little dizzying at times. And sometimes you get 4 different species flying around. All right, here's our next one. I made this one a little bit harder. And if you know the answers, feel free to type that in. But also if you want to tell us the gender, if you think it's a male or a female, you can do so as well. We can get our fingers moving, our brains moving. It's almost 5 o'clock. We can do it. Feel free to type in your answers into the chat. These 2 species are definitely a little bit harder than the last ones, I think, because they can look very similar to other species. And I will tell you, because I will show you the pictures of the other gender, And that will probably help you narrow it down once I do that. But I can feel the brains moving. Once we get some answers, we'll move on to the next one. And we're getting close on time. A really good identifying mark on the one on the left is that beak and that the kind of lighter brown eyebrow. Polly is on it. She has let us know that that is a female red-winged blackbird. So let's pull up the pictures of the males. That might help others as well. So I like to throw the female red-winged blackbird into birding quizzes because a lot of us know the red-wing blackbird as that male. We see it a lot. And it can be, really exciting and they're so cool to see. But also the female looks so different. They're so sexually dimorphic. They look different. But sometimes when I'm out birding with new people, they think it might be a sparrow or it might be something else or like a finch. So really important to look at that. And good job, other folks got the Bullock's Oriole. So again, I'm really excited for these to return. But the female, I wanted to throw up pictures of females because they may be a little more drab, but they can be a lot harder to identify because they're not that bright, showy male. So good job. Thank you all for participating in that one. And I'm going to move on to our next picture. So hopefully you're ready to type it in. And this is going to be one of our last ones before a little bonus round. I have so many great memories of seeing these birds in different locations, especially if you live out here in the foothills. You've probably seen these, maybe at your feeder. But we do have some males and some females up on this slide. And again, do not feel bad guessing. I think if you're guessing, you're thinking, and that means you're going to be learning. And it's also 110% to say that you don't know. Birding is a lifelong passion. It takes a long time to get these birds down. All right, the answers are coming in. On the left, we have a male and a female Western tanager, which are really beautiful birds if you've never seen one before. If you get out to the foothills in the summertime, or if you put out like an orange, cut open orange onto your feeders, you might be able to attract them as well. And the ones on the right, good job, folks. This is the black-headed grosbeak. Those are, I have so many good memories of hearing them sing in the evening and just looking at them at the feeders as well. So those are a couple of birds that you can actually see at your feeders in the summertime, or out hiking in the beautiful weather. So here's our last bonus round, just to get us really excited for spring to come, even though the weather feels like spring. Here's our bonus round. So feel free to type it in one at a time. You can do them all at once. There is a tricky one in here. And again, most of these are migratory, but not all. And this is going to be our last bonus round before we wrap it up for questions and conversation. All right, thank you, Diane, for putting your answer in. Yes, I love that people are putting, you have to get to family before you get to species if you're learning. So thank you all for really giving it a shot and putting in the families before you put in species. Number one's tricky. I don't know if anyone's gotten that one yet, but got to get our brains moving. So I will let you know, number two, we've gotten it. It's a lazuli bunting, or lazuli. I say lazuli. Some people say lazuli. Number three is a beautiful golden crowned kinglet. Number four is the Say's Phoebe, which we got on our Christmas bird count at the Old Stone House at Bar Lake, which was pretty exciting. And number one is a tough one. But if we look, it's a small picture, but if you look at the beak reminds me of an oriole. And it looks like Zoom user, sorry, I don't know your name. They got it. It's an orchard oriole. So I wanted to throw that one in because the females look a lot like a female bullocks as well. And the female orioles can be definitely tricky to identify, but the challenge is what it's all about. So thank you all for participating in my fun little virtual birding. I really, really appreciate it. I think it's just fun to try to test our knowledge. And especially since these birds don't fly away, it's okay. So lastly, I've said it before, I'll say it again, birding, it's a skill. To get better at a skill, you have to practice. So the more that you go out, the more that you are learning and using eBird and thinking about birds, the better you're going to get. But I will let you know, the better you get, sometimes the harder it can be, because you're going to start getting into hearing calls and songs to try to identify. You just become more curious about birds in general. So the better you get, the harder it can get, but the better it is. So if you would like to learn more about birds, Denver Audubon has so many great programs. Bird Conservancy does as well. We have a lot of our a lot up on our YouTube channel about all of the past webinars we've been doing this past year. And lastly, before I open it up to discussion and questions, I challenge you all to get out this weekend and do an eBird checklist. Try to download it on your phone and try your best to submit a checklist and go out and count birds, because what you're seeing definitely goes to a bigger picture. And this is just one simple step that we can all do to further bird conservation for us, for our organization at Bird Conservancy, for Denver Audubon, for all of us, to make sure that we have birds in the future. Make sure we're doing these 7 simple steps. So here's just our keep in touch slide. Thank you so much for attending. I do want to have a nice, lovely conversation since we are going to 5:30. But I did want to mention quickly, Bird Conservancy does have a webinar that's coming up on Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it's all about connecting to birds in nature. It's a writing workshop. So it's a little different than what we've done in the past. But if you feel like you need some chill time and get back into some writing, it's going to be a great webinar that we'll have on Thursday. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Susie, you can let me know of any questions I might have definitely missed because I wasn't looking at the chat.
Sure.
And feel free to you all can put your videos on if you want to do that, or remain off screen. It's up to you.
So we did have some questions about using eBird and Merlin as well. So we have one person who uses Merlin, was wondering if you find Merlin useful as well. And I believe Merlin now has the ability to create checklists, and I believe that does tie into eBird. What do you know about Merlin?
Yeah, Merlin is, I honestly wish I had Merlin when I first started birding. It's such a great tool. And it really helps you narrow down species that you might be identifying. And it's free. Instead of lugging around your field guide, we always have our phones on us. And you can link, since eBird is through Cornell Lab of Ornithology, so is Merlin. So you can link your eBird account. It's basically a Cornell account to your Merlin. And I'm not sure if you can do checklists straight from Merlin, but I know if you do a checklist through eBird, it will go to Merlin and it'll keep your life list in Merlin based on your eBird checklists. But
yeah, I think I agree. I think they are connected now. When I was looking through some of the Great Backyard Birding information, I believe you can submit your Great Backyard Bird counts via Merlin checklist as well. It doesn't submit it if you identify using Merlin, but if you go the extra step and add it to a list and your Merlin account is connected to your Cornell eBird account, I think that can be recorded. And we'll have more information probably at our training programs.
Yeah, my guess, since it's connected, it just goes to an eBird checklist.
And then another question about eBird on the mobile app specifically. We were having a little bit of a conversation about whether the science and trends and the maps are available on the eBird mobile app.
Great question. They are not. So the eBird app it's specifically just to submit checklists. But they did just come out with an app like last year for hotspots. So you can download just the eBird hotspot app, which is free as well. But to go through the exploring and the trends, that's only on the website currently.
And if your mobile phone does have access to data and internet, I believe the link to the eBird website is in the app somewhere as well. I think I've linked to it there before.
Yeah.
And then a question about, okay, this is more of a conservation question. I've not had a lot of conversations with experts on this, but Steve and Donna were asking about postings about different birds this winter in people's yards that don't typically live in the metro area. And they were wondering how much the Colorado wildfires affected the population and drove the birds down from the mountains into the metro area.
Yeah, I'm curious on the long run because I feel like there's been a lot more observations in general in people's backyards because we are spending a lot more time at home, and maybe we're seeing things that we normally don't see. But if you're doing an eBird checklist and you have an uncommon bird or a rare bird that doesn't pop up, you can still enter it. You just have to enter some details, and a photo would be nice. There are regional editors that go through all of the eBird data and all of the checklists, and they have to be confirmed to have it. And then based on the wildfires, there was a good study that just came out about it, about all those bird deaths that happened during, like in Southwest Colorado and into Arizona. A lot of migratory birds were being found dead. And the study that came out linked it to wildfires and early snow. But I think there has been an eruption with finches this year, especially like pine siskins and Cassin's finches. And even some people are seeing redpolls down here in Denver, which is really cool. It could be linked to the fires. Again, I think all that people are still studying it currently, but I think we'll have more. I mean, it's a great observation. It's definitely what I would think as well.
I definitely have a mountain chickadee that's been hanging out with the black-capped chickadees in my yard, and I think it's just one, but I don't know. I've never seen more than one at a time.
Yeah, I just got that on my yard bird list this year too. So.
And then this is just a question, since we know you're based out of Bar Lake, is there water in Bar Lake right now?
Yeah, I was out there on Sunday and they have filled it back up. It's not full. And a lot of it is frozen, but there is a little bit of frozen or open water there. And we did our Christmas bird count out there on the 27th. And there's plenty of open water with lots of cool eagles and ducks and waterfowl out there. So get out to Bar Lake. It's still, a great place to go birding. And hopefully we get more water this year.
If anybody does have a question that you did not put in the chat for us, please unmute yourself. You can turn your video off, or turn your video on, I guess I should say. Unmute yourself, and now is a great time for additional questions that you might have thought of during this time. And then we do have kind of a couple of discussion or questions for you as well that we might pose if we are done with taking your questions. Then we might pose a couple questions and get your answers. Yeah,
like I said earlier, I'd love to have this be very interactive. So if you're comfortable, feel free to turn your videos on and have a little discussion, because I know I told you about so much information in that last hour. I would love to break it up a little bit.
So I have a question about syncing. So I have an iPhone and I have a MacBook Air. And sometimes when I see a bird, especially like ducks recently, I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing. I took a photo and I thought if I could load it onto my computer, I could get a better picture of it. I could see it better. I didn't want to send anything in that hadn't confirmed. So is it easy to do that? To sync different devices?
I guess I'm not the best person at technology, but if you have like an SD card, I'm sure it was an iPhone photo.
Yeah.
Okay. Whenever I have that, I personally just email it to myself. So I take the photo on my iPhone and then I email it, and then I go on my email from my computer.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thanks.
Yeah. There's also Bluetooth and stuff, but that's a little more complicated.
Okay, thanks.
And for those of you who do take photos, I know Tyler kind of mentioned this, but you can upload photos to eBird on the website if you need to change a list, because maybe you did call it one thing and then you researched it or checked with your birding buddy and found out it was something different, you can actually adjust your checklists on the website by logging in and making some changes there.
Yeah. Another great thing I forgot to mention with eBird and checklist. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but you can also share your checklist. So if you're going out and you're birding with some friends, and you all don't want to do a separate checklist, you can designate the one person that really likes their phone. And then at the end of the day, you can share that checklist with the people that you're birding with, just based on their eBird username. And I know I don't like to have my phone on me personally. I'm not a big phone user. But I love going birding with people when I can, and I always ask. I'm the person that says, "Please share with me, share me your checklist," because it is really important. And you have to enter your observers anyways. So if you are birding with people, it's a great way for some folks to kind of split up their tasks.
And if you are birding with other individuals, do make sure you do that, because that helps scientists who are using the data know that those birds were seen by a group of people versus, we're, two people hiking separately and they saw, how are we counting these birds during this time? So it's really helpful for them to know if the bird that is in the eBird checklist is part of the same sighting from a group of people, or whether it was a unique sighting by somebody else who came along at a slightly different time.
Yeah.
And then a couple of things that I wanted to add about community science that I thought of when Tyler was talking about that as well. We did mention that the Great Backyard Bird Count is coming up in February. We'd love for all of you to participate in that. Also the Climate Watch, which is sponsored by National Audubon. The Climate Watch is looking at, I think they have this year 4 or 6, I can't remember, I need to go back to the website and look, but they have specific species that they are following, and they're hoping to have those species monitored in all locations so that they can determine if the birds' typical range is shifting. So, when you see nothing and you're doing a specific count or climate watch or any kind of type of thing where you're looking for a specific species, I know sometimes we feel a little disappointed when we see nothing, but seeing nothing is data as well. And it's very, very, very important to scientists when the count is 0 on something specific that you're looking for. So the Climate Watch has identified some specific species. So even if you are a novice birder and feel like you don't know anything about, the oriole versus a finch, then you can participate in the Climate Watch count, where you can select an area that's convenient to you to go look for a specific bird, and then simply report back an absence of that bird, no, you did not see it, or the presence of that bird and how many you saw. And that's super helpful for their climate research that they're looking at. And then another community science program that uses iNaturalist is the City Nature Challenge, which occurs in the spring. And I want to say it's in April. I think it's the last weekend of April. And we also participate in that and frequently provide trainings for iNaturalist. So you can watch for those programs and community science opportunities as well. Any other questions before we close out?
Yeah, I have a question, kind of for Tyler, but for you too, Susie. Are there any particular areas that you guys are looking at as far as conservation, like areas or specific birds when it comes to this community science, or is it more just about the overall picture of what people are seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know at Bird Conservancy, we have a lot of funding that's going towards the Great Plains. So the Northern Great Plains, we're studying grasshopper sparrows, Baird sparrows, lark buntings, and Sprague's pipit. And we're studying them in their wintering range and also in their summering range. So we're going from like Montana all the way down into Mexico. So those are kind of our target species for a specific program. But we do our IMBCR surveys that are really just studying the overall abundance of birds as well. So I feel like if you are into community science, or maybe you're a grad student that wants a specific program, you can also find that as well.
So for Denver Audubon, most of the science that we do is really reporting to eBird on our bird walks. It's possible we might start tracking certain species moving forward as we're looking at some of our new conservation and stewardship programs that we might be putting together. For the Climate Watch specifically, looks like the birds, I haven't found it yet, so I can't really answer that question as to what those few species are specifically that Climate Watch is doing at this time. But great question. Thank you, Mary.
Susie, I've got a question. I
Yes.
heard that American kestrel is decreasing, and is that true around? Because we saw a nesting box at Audubon, and we saw a kestrel with it. This was recently, and then the person I was with said that they're working to monitor American kestrels because they're decreasing. Is that true?
I have heard the same, although I don't have any specifics on that. How about you, Tyler?
A lot of bird species, the majority of bird species are declining, just as an overall blanket statement. I think the only ones that aren't are vireos are strangely not. But if you go onto the 3billionbirds.org website, they do break it down based on habitats. So they'll break it down from habitats, but also certain species as well. So they have a lot of really good graphics that are really user-friendly to look at. And it will go into overall. The waterfowl group also are actually doing pretty well because of all the conservation efforts that hunters have done. And then all bald eagles as well are doing well, so larger raptors. But other than that, a lot of species are declining rapidly.
Another source for learning which birds are on the increase versus the decline is the Partners in Flight Land Bird report. They have some really good details on and databases if you want to delve into the raw data, talking about the different birds and some of the findings that they've had as to whether species are on the decline or increasing. And they even have a list that's specifically common birds that are in decline. They're certainly not so low that they're considered, close to being threatened or anything like that, but they have noticed that the populations of some common birds have dropped over the years, which is concerning just because they've always been considered common birds. They frequently are habitat generalists and do well in developed habitats that you find in our neighborhoods. And it's concerning that those birds are also on the decline. So that's another resource that you can look at. Great questions.
I have another question. We do the bird count, the bird banding at the Nature Center usually every spring. Is there any way to get access to what we're getting, and especially migratory birds that might be passing through there? Is there a record of that that's available to the public?
That's a great question. We don't have anything publicly available anywhere. We do have a monthly walk the wetlands, and that checklist is frequently posted at our nature center, but at this time we haven't put it in a public internet website. That's something that we are thinking about as an option for resources. And then the Christmas bird count information and the spring bird count information typically goes back to Audubon, and they have that data available. I don't know how site specific it is though, if you're looking for numbers at a specific location like our center.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then for our bird banding station that we do out of Bar Lake in the fall, that Meredith, she runs the spring one out in Chatfield as well. She's really good about posting data onto CoBirds. So CoBirds is a group where it's just a Google group where people report their findings. But especially during the birding season or the banding season, so in the fall and the spring, Meredith is really good about posting basically every day of what she's caught and the numbers. And I know she's going to be coming out with a full report of our fall banding soon. I don't know exactly. She will post it on CoBirds, but I don't know exactly where she posted besides there. But I could always reach out to her, and because she's part of our education department as well, and get data.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up by just sharing a couple more slides. Just a reminder that this is a Conservation in Colorado series of lectures. We do one a month, typically the first or second week of the month. And this year we have opted for this lecture series to be free. We are still, of course, welcome your support through you joining our email list to learn about our additional programs. Becoming a financial supporter is also welcome for both organizations, both Denver Audubon and Bird Conservancy. And if you do decide to support financially, if you just put Conservation in Colorado in the notes, that just helps us know where you heard about this program and our organization. Some upcoming programs that you might be interested in: we do have a virtual backyard birding by ear on January 16th. As we mentioned, the Great Backyard Bird Count trainings for Denver Audubon are happening on January 26th. And of note, we are doing one specific for families. So if you have some children or know of some children who might be interested in looking for some birds in their neighborhood, they can join our family training program on that date. For Conservation in Colorado, we are talking about happy cats and healthy birds in February. And then in March, we are discussing bird strikes on buildings and windows. And I think we have one more in April, which is going to be talking about pesticides, and we'll have more information on those as the time gets closer. So thank you very, very much for joining Tyler and myself for this program. We appreciate your support, we appreciate your learning, and we appreciate your contributions to science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Tyler and Susie.
You are welcome.